There's the ex-girlfriend that will yell her head off at you, that will key your car, that will trash talk you to all her girlfriends. But then there are the creepy ones. You don't think they exist, but they do. That's what we're covering in this video. Men, what's your creepy woman story? Story 1. Basically, I had a yandere for a semi-girlfriend. She was overweight a bit, but in the sense that it just accentuated her features rather than obscured them. She had an obvious crush on me, but being the idiot that I was, and still am according to my friends, I had no idea. Anyway, she comes to me during an event and asks me to date her. I initially say no because A, instant nerves, and B, she had a reputation for being kind of weird. She insists and says that anything I may have heard about her is untrue because it's all part of a smear campaign from her ex-boyfriend. Having gone through that pain myself, I relented and said yes, but not completely so that I can consider how romance works. I'm a nerd who literally has a harder time making friends than I do writing Dungeons & Dragons homebrew manuals. The next day, she witnesses me getting the hell beaten out of me by my third bully, according to my list of people who hate me. I had no idea she saw that, though, so I thought that when his windshield was smashed, a rock or tree hit it. Nope, it was her. She smashed his windshield to get him back for hurting those I love. Dude, I barely know you. Why would you commit a criminal act to protect someone you barely knew? I thought it was sweet, honestly, but I told her not to escalate it to that level again. She agrees, and we move on. Fast forward to a month later. We'd had a nice couple of weeks, casually being semi-romantic and hanging out. One day, she meets up with me, dragging along a bruised, beaten girl by the ripped shirt and says, in a Dolores Umbridge-like voice, "This one was stalking you. Finish her off for me, would you?" I stare, aghast. As a person who avoids confrontation like Karens avoid wearing face masks, this was the last thing I wanted, besides intimacy. I say, no, and we're done. I cannot associate myself with abusive people anymore. I will not deal with any more of this. For context, my old friend group I had before meeting her was extremely toxic. They even teamed up to get the star high school football player sent to prison for substance charges by planting weed in his hubcaps, all for a single snide remark he made at school to the ringleader. I walk away, taking my hurting friend, whose future boyfriend held me at knife point in the bathroom at a party a few months later because I am a threat to his relationship, into the building we met up at. I made sure she got treated and went home to hide from the inevitable payback I was sure to get. I dodged a bullet in that she was arrested for assault charges that I phoned in before she could have her revenge. She got out after I moved away with my family, so I still have yet to know if her behavior ever improved. I really hope she's not lurking in the shadows and somehow followed him to where he moved. It sounds like this is something this girl would do. Somehow, this type of violence is just far more creepy than the average girl blowing up at a boyfriend. There's crazy, and then there's insane. Story 2. I have many stories, but one I will share is when I was 16. I was kicked out of my parents' house. I was headstrong and angry at the world, and they had every right to do so. Anyhow, my friend's mom and dad let me stay with them, rent-free, just to get back on my feet and finish high school without the added stress of a job. They offered to let me stay for the next 2 years to do so. I had always had a crush on my friend's mom, whom I will call Elle. She was absolutely breathtakingly beautiful, smart, funny, and fiercely strong. One day, I had a day off from school, and she was home with a day off too. We were sitting in her living room on opposite sides of the couch, talking about her days in high school, her dreams, mine, our lives, work, etc. And after a serious bout of laughter, she got up to pour herself a cup of coffee. When she came back, she sat down right beside me, put her hand on my thigh, looked me in the eyes and asked, "Do you think I'm pretty?" I blinked and said, "Of course. You're beautiful." She moved her hand even higher on my thigh, almost at my pelvis at that point, and whispered, "My husband hasn't touched me in 3 years. I'm so lonely. He makes me feel unwanted and unloved. Can you make me feel pretty, Chris?" I stood up, cleared my throat, and told her I had to go do my homework and rushed off to my friend's room. When I came back downstairs 10 minutes later, she was gone. I packed my duffel bag, walked out the door, and went to go live in the bush for a month until my folks dragged me home. I never spoke to her or my friend again. I'd have refused to lie if he asked why I suddenly moved out, and I didn't want to say anything about it to him. How do you tell your friend his mom's a pervert? The fantasy upon meeting reality was shattered, and it was creepy as hell. I was wigged right the hell out. Keep in mind, I was 16 and she was 44 years old. The spicy sites paint such a different picture about what they expect to happen here, don't they? I mean, I'm asking you. I wouldn't know personally. No, not at all. Not one bit. Anyway, good on this 16-year-old for having a head on his shoulders after thinking about what the consequences could be. Not many 16-year-olds would have that frame of mind. Story 3. When I was in middle school, my class had received a student teacher. She looked to be 20 or 21 and was pretty nice but very neutral on how she treated students. My best friend at the time and I were one of the few good students, with most of the others just liking to act out. If I remember correctly, there were 5 students who actually behaved, including me and my friend, so it always felt odd that she notably treated me different from everyone else in the classroom. Even my friend found it weird when I pointed it out to him. She was always passive-aggressive toward my friend and the well-behaved students, but then slightly rude to the ones that did misbehave. However, when it came to me, she was always nice, sometimes a little too nice. One time, I remember I couldn't finish an assignment due to me forgetting about it, and she gave me time to finish in class, but when another student who also didn't do it for whatever reason and asked for more time, she blew up on him. Another time that creeped me out was after I came back from when I was sick and out of school for a few days. She told me that she was really glad that I was back, rubbing my shoulders with both hands before she dragged one hand down my back slowly and left to continue the class. My best friend also saw this, and heard her too. We both agreed that it was an uncomfortable situation. I would like to say I was the youngest of my class, being at age 12, because my school at the time allowed kids to start class early. I'm now 19 years old, and this is probably the most I went public with this. My parents did find out about it 3 years ago after I had a panic attack in high school because I saw someone who looked similar to her and was taken to a hospital. Legal actions were taken, but nothing came from it. Sounds like a lot of stuff was waiting to happen but never did. I think this person benefited from not being completely alone. He had his friend with whom he could sound things off of. And again, another situation that the movies really want to paint in a totally different light. It's sad that nothing happened when they took legal action, though. Story 4. I actually have 2 stories. One from high school and one more current. In high school, I often kept to myself. This was because by this point, I had learned that not everyone at school had your best interest or even cares about you. Well, when I was walking between classes my senior or junior year, sometime after lunch, just trying to get to my next stop, I was deep in my phone when the next thing I knew, I felt a hand touch my hair. I looked back to see this girl I had never talked to in my entire life being there, even if I had seen her once or twice. Bewildered as all hell, I was just like, "What the hell? Why you go and do that?" Her excuse? "Sorry, your hair just looks so soft." Still to this day, I have no clue what her deal was. But my thought process was maybe someone sent her to harass me or something. As for the more recent creepy woman, it's a coworker I have. Admittedly, I know more about this chick's personal life than I could ever care to learn, mostly because she brings her personal affairs to work, so to speak. She has no tact, an abrasive personality, and a voice to match, as well as an incel complex. And I don't use that term lightly, because she's looked me dead in my eye and said, "Yeah, all the guys I try to date are either taken or gay." Doesn't take a psychic to see why. She has no personal boundaries, constantly yells, gets belligerent over trivial matters, and even expects everyone to be at her beck and call at all times. All of this, and she can't even be fired because she got her hand amputated after causing our co-worker she would go drinking with to swerve off the road with her hand out of the window. Story 5. Had a couple of girls, at separate times, do the fatal attractions thing on me. One introduced me to her husband to let me know what I was missing out on. Another freaked out at work in front of coworkers when she found out I started dating someone I met. "I worked on him for the last year," was what someone who witnessed said. In both cases, I was just friendly with him before the weirdness. The first I had worked with and knew for a few years. The second I knew long enough that she would regularly tell me about her boyfriends, like I was one of her girlfriends. She did the whole anger, passive-aggressive thing for the next year, and it only ended when I left the company. I've had invitations to dinner parties where I wound up being the only other person, or the other guests were a couple that the host knew. And I've had women pursue me as next when breaking up with their boyfriends or getting divorced. And a few instances of women who weren't going to take no for an answer when I didn't want to be intimate with them in what I thought was a neutral location. If the genders were reversed, it would have been called violation. A couple of those, the intimacy was before the woman told me she was getting engaged or married. Real-life smash in smash, marry, kill, I suppose. I'm friendly. I like people, like to talk to them, and start from a place of respect. I guess that sends some people the wrong message. Story 6. My former best friend was incredibly creepy looking back then. She was clingy beyond belief, got scared I would leave her, and threatened me whenever I went to do something on my own. She also had a major crush on my boyfriend at the time, even though she had a chance to ask him out before he and I started dating. She didn't stop flirting with him even after he and I got married. And she would get mad whenever something didn't go her way even slightly while yelling at me for getting my depression treated, saying I was now crazy for getting help. She also took on my story of being abused as her own, even though I have diagnosed PTSD from barely escaping with my life. She took it as me attention-seeking and was mad that my husband swept me off my feet to get away from the psycho family member instead of him marrying her. My husband has told me he never had any interest in her, but she kept saying I stole every man she ever loved. Somehow? I never understood that one, but I later learned she would get crushes on any boy who crushed on me out of pure pettiness. I eventually told her to F off after knowing her for 20 years. Never looking back now, and my husband and I both have lower blood pressure after dropping her. How can you put up with a creepy friend for 20 years? Did this person have trouble making other friends? I think she's really fortunate she was able to find someone she could marry and trust. I think at least this person had much more easier times making friends than this really clingy woman.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 7. There was this CrossFit woman who was creepy towards me. She had me help her with weighted pull-ups, had weird conversations, topics like she out of the blue told me how she was so exhausted once that she couldn't get up off the bed and use the bathroom. She tells me in graphic detail how she urinated on her bed. Also asked my age, which I was 32 and she was 28, so she said that makes her feel good. I misheard her say something at one point, apologized for not catching what she said, admitted I can be dense sometimes, and then she tried to chastise me by saying I shouldn't apologize for who I am. She had like 5% body fat because you could see her individual muscle strains. Needless to say, I don't see why this woman was interested in me, since she was super low body fat, while I was a simple 300-pound-plus fat guy just trying to do my powerlifting workout and use the treadmill. But I changed my workout schedule and kept a good distance from this creepy fitness woman. Story 8. My creepy, crazy ex called me 3 years later after we broke up, and she sounded high, drunk, whatever, anything besides normal, and wanted to get back together, said no multiple times, and she kept taking it as a yes, and it went on and on from marriage to kids and so on. Managed to get through to her stating no to everything, and she got upset and said that we had already banged and she got pregnant. Note, we never did it and I'm still a virgin. Called Cap and proceeds to describe how we did it at a party. I moved a year after we broke up, by the way, and was roughly 3 hours away. I again called Cap, and she didn't do it with me then, and I wouldn't bang her at all, as she casually said she doesn't care, and she'll tie me up and make me do it with her. That froze me for a solid minute, and I hung up and ignored the next 5 calls before blocking the number, which I did before, so I don't know how it was unblocked. Told my parents, and they were thinking the same thing as me. She's crazy. Story 9. I also had an ex who suffered from depression, and I had to realize that most of my love feelings were me just not wanting her to unalive herself. I learned later down the line that she was also a pathological liar and only did self-harm for the attention she got afterwards. Looking back on it now, when she revealed that she self-harmed to me 3 days after middle school just started, she did a dramatic gasp as if she didn't want to say it, and now it seems pretty fake looking back on it. I'm sick of people who lie about depression for attention, because depression is a real thing that people suffer through, and we genuinely want to help them out. And there are those who also know that fact, and so fake depression to make everything about them. I have yet to face a situation where one person is actually depressed and a jerkwad tries to make everything about their depression and not the person who actually needs help, which makes my blood boil just thinking about it. Where do people get the idea that lying about depression or anything else bad like intimate or physical assault is an okay thing to do? It's just a lot of desperation. If there are some people that are getting help for something they suffer from, there's still going to be someone who's going to try and get attention by faking that symptom or circumstance. It's unfortunate, but it's a fact of life we have to accept today. We just have to be vigilant and be aware of what those signs of depression or whatever actually are. Story 10. Funny thing is, I had a girlfriend named Laura before. Things started out perfectly, but stuff went downhill really fast. She went from a really nice, doting girlfriend to someone I didn't even recognize anymore. I found out she had really bad anger issues and would blow up on me if I even looked in another girl's direction. And after we'd get into those arguments, it'd end with her sending me pictures of her cutting wrists, threatening to unalive herself, and saying I'm doing this to her. After I had a mental breakdown, I was only able to work up the courage to break up to her thanks to my friends having my back and convincing me that it's for the best. It was hard for me to leave her because even though she treated me like garbage, I thought that at some point we'd be able to develop a healthy relationship. Now that I'm out of the relationship, I see that nothing would have changed. I'm glad that I'm out of that situation, and I'm feeling a lot better about myself confidence-wise. But I'm still a little scared of relationships. Story 11. I do have a semi-creepy story. Back in 4th or 5th grade, or around that, our teacher would be absent pretty much 40% of the whole school year, whether that be from sickness, a parent passing, whatever. Pretty normal. We had a sub, forgot her name, so she'll be called Mrs. Sub, and she was pretty nice at first, but kinda showed her true colors with yelling and whatever. I have ADHD, and I often zone out for 3 to 20 minutes or however long I do it. I mostly stared off to my right at the floor, and 3 different times she would walk right where I'm standing and then proceed to lean on my desk. Very quickly I would look away, and she would just be smiling. I was also writing something, and so whenever I wanted to or not, I'd have to show it to her. I'm not sure if she was doing it on purpose, but it felt way too coincidental for her not to realize it, especially since she did it 3 separate times. Story 12. Table of women in their mid-40s at a restaurant I was working at, just filthy talking a male coworker, asking him if he ever worked in just a thong, trying to make him pick things up in inappropriate places, throwing ice at his butt. He was clearly upset by it, but wouldn't let anyone step in, and felt like it wasn't okay for him to complain. A table of male customers doing the same thing to one of the girls? The manager would have hurled them into the street and maybe called the cops. Story 13. Where I worked a couple decades ago, a woman I worked with had a female friend, so when the work gang would hang out, the friend would also sometimes come along. I was nice to the girl. I'm nice to everybody. Treat others as you would wish to be treated and all that. Next thing I know, I'm getting flowers at work from this girl. I didn't like her like that. I also didn't want to hurt her feelings because as a guy I know what rejection feels like. I ended up having a talk with the work friend and had her explain the situation to her friend to try and avoid an awkward situation and hurt feelings. Story 14. I only have one crazy woman story that's not nearly as crazy as this, but I dated a girl once for a few months back in high school. We only had intercourse one time. A few months after that, we broke up, and she proceeded to stalk me on every social media afterwards. She would constantly message me asking me what I was doing and who I was with. Eventually got to the point where I blocked her. Then she made alternate accounts to keep stalking me. Then after just deleting all my social medias, she started dating other men and bragged about how much intercourse they were having together in attempts to get me jealous and possibly take me back. After ignoring her for a long time, it eventually stopped. Story 15. The thing is, no matter the gender or race of a person, it's their actions and behavior that make them seem terrifying. I'd be scared of a man or woman that did something like this, and I didn't know them. This is why I tried to stay close to someone I was familiar with, like a family member, a friend, or even an employee when I needed help. Girls aren't the only ones who have problems with these things. Men have to deal with it too. People can be terrifying and disturbing no matter who they are. Story 16. I went to hang out with a girl from Tinder and things got lewd. Just naked kissing and touching. I wasn't ready to go further than that and got scared. The next day, she had gone out and bought collars, leashes, and animal ears and plugs for me. I had not mentioned being into that sort of thing, and it never came up at all whatsoever. At the time, I found it creepy, but now I'm just upset that she decided I was a cross-dressing furry bottom after just one day of kissing and talking. Story 17. A couple years ago, I was taking my 2 middle daughters, same age, one is adopted and one is biological, to doctor appointments. They were 7 at the time and wanted ice cream, so I stopped at a place. This woman, mid-30s, starts talking to my girls and she seems normal until she leaned towards me and then whispers, "You must have good sperm." It was hands down the creepiest thing I've ever experienced. Story 18. I was picking up some snacks from Target when a woman came up behind me and pinched my butt. She called me cute and wanted my cell number, but I told her I was married. She didn't seem to mind that fact, but I was sufficiently creeped out. Also, her kid was standing right next to her watching this whole thing happen. I was pretty freaked out, and my wife was ticked to hear about it. Story 19. When I was in 4th grade, I had a girl I liked tell me she liked me. I reciprocated. She then said she was mad at me and spent the rest of the year making fun of me for being chubby. Could have just been her playing a joke on me initially, but I remember being so confused why someone would get mad at you for liking them back. I grew up to realize that's just how many women are. It still makes no sense, but I've just accepted it. Story 20. During school, a girl in my class came and confessed to me. I told her I was already in a relationship and had no interest in her. She broke down and claimed she would unalive the shrew that was with me, unalive my friends and family to kidnap me just to be with her. I looked back every minute on my way back home to make sure no one was following me. 1 week later, she moved to another school. Story 21. Friend of mine dated a girl who was very white, almost albino, but with blue eyes. Told him and all her friends she had leukemia. She didn't. Never did work out how she expected that to pan out. When it came to light, all her friends and my friend wanted no more to do with her.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.